Welcome one, welcome all to the Politics of Cinema. On this show, we believe films are never neutral. There's a political as well as artistic message captured on purpose or on accident in every film, and we're on the lookout for all of it. My name is Aaron Spears.
And my name is Isaac Miller, and on this episode, we're talking about George A. Romero's. Oh my God. You're going to end up using that, aren't you? God damn it.
I might.
And and I'm Isaac Miller, and on this episode, we're talking about George A. Romero's Martin from 1977.
Indeed. Being a stickler for release dates, it's billed as 77 on, what's the film site we're always on? Letterboxd. But then when you go and look at it, it played at like the Cannes Film Festival Marketplace in 77, then got a theatrical release in spring of 78. So if we want to be purists about it, but
so it's more on a modern indie cycle almost.
A little bit, yeah, right. Yeah. So, but before we dive in with Martin and some more George Romero, Isaac, we are in October is here. We're in the middle of October at this point. What else are you watching that isn't Romero related for the month of October?
So here's the thing. This whole PhD thing is totally getting in the way of watching movies, which clearly means it wasn't worth it, but it's too late now. It's not too late. I could get out, but I'm just getting back into the rhythm of watching stuff. So honestly, I've watched 4 movies so far this month, which is not very much for me. That being said, I actually started my Halloween watching really early, and I'm counting things that way. So, the stuff that's really, there's been a bunch of stuff. I finally saw Titane, which I don't think I'm saying that correctly, but which is
in a theater too.
In a theater, I saw it in a theater with one other person. It's Julia. I'm so bad at French pronunciation. Ducarneau. And not only that,
the director of Raw.
From the director of Raw, which is a movie I actually like a little bit more. It's a lot. It's a movie you have to process a lot. I don't have like deep takes, honestly. I'd probably need to see it again. It looks like it is going to be France's like entry to the Academy Awards. It's a big deal, obviously. Yeah. It's I think it's an impressive body horror, but I'm still sort of working through it. But that was fun. But part of it was is like I had this day off, like this day I'd like set aside, and like I'm going to go to the theaters. It's like I could have gone and seen Venom, which would have been dumb and fun. Instead, I go see like intense body horror, and it's like at the end it was like I like this, but I'm not the kind of person where I come out of it like feeling better.
I haven't seen it yet, but from what I've heard from you and a couple other friends that have seen it, I don't know if anybody's coming out of that theater feeling better.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem like the point of that one necessarily.
Yeah. So I watched 1974's Abby, which is a blaxploitation horror movie involving a Nigerian sex god in possessing a virtuous woman, and involving the great William Marshall, who elevates anything that he's in, that best known for Blackula. Just one of those like presences that just like ups the ante. It's a lot of fun. It's on YouTube, right. Not in very good quality. I watched Frenzy, which is Hitchcock's last movie, which is basically kind of like everything he's done before, in the sense that, oh look, it's The Wrong Man. Oh look, it's a serial killer, kind of. Not like everything he's done before, except that he gets 70s content, so it's actually pretty harrowing. Like there's sexual violence that's actually harrowing. It's really good. Shocking.
Right. Which, I mean, at that point, at that point too, yeah, because like you have very few instances of Hitchcock with what you picture as a modern rating system and allowed to lean into, different kind of content than what he could show previously. Which I had a film professor who argued that was actually when it didn't work for him, that he was better when he couldn't show. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that or not.
So here's the thing: I think even with Psycho, you see he can push things a little bit more than he could have, like in the 40s.
Sure.
That works for him pretty well. Here's the thing: if he made a whole 10 years worth of movies like that, I don't know if it would work. And also, he would be running so quickly into his Spawn, either Italian versions or
Yeah,
American New Wave people. Uh, you know that it would start to get a little weird, and I don't know how it would work. I think having at least one movie where he's able to do that and showing how he can handle it is pretty good.
yeah.
Um, so I feel like
Just
your
just
professor's
a taste. Yeah,
yeah, I feel like your professor's kind of jumping the gun a little. Like, how much of this is there?
I think it was just one of his precious cinematic icons. I mean, he
Fair.
wrote a book on horror. I mean, I think he knows what he's talking about. I'm probably also not characterizing that entirely accurately, but
And I watched House of Usher from '60, which is I think the first of the Price and Roger Corman Poe cycle, which is great. They're all great, actually. It's like that's your bump in the night horror. It's really a lot of fun.
we got to do the Poe cycle with air quotes on a podcast, right?
Yeah, we do. Right, because
Like
none of them
the
actually have
Poe cycle.
anything. Yeah, well, none of them have anything to do with Edgar Allan Poe. They just
Right,
have
right.
quotes at the end. It's great. I love it. And I feel like that happens with Poe a lot, right? Because I also watched The Raven from like what 35 with like Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, and like yeah, it's just Lugosi's Madman is like super into Poe, but like we're not actually going to adapt to The Raven somehow. I think The Simpsons has honestly gotten closest to actually adapting The Raven.
I
Um,
think you're right.
oh, The Simpsons, the Treehouse of Horror episode, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, I also just sort of so these are this is all actually like making me feel a lot better. Um, I think I mentioned last time I watched The Amusement Park, which is the a lost. I think I mentioned last time, which is a lost Romero that's now up on Shutter, which is
Yeah.
great.
Which is like his
And
public service announcement movie,
for the
return
Lutherans
movie.
or something. It's for like the Lutherans.
Yeah,
It's a service announcement, telling people, basically on ageism, and it's
right.
harrowing, right? I want to treat older people better now. Not that I didn't treat them well before. I'm not a bad person. And then I can't remember if I'd seen this before the last episode, but I have no idea how to pronounce this. VIY, which is a Soviet horror movie from 70 or from 67 about
Hmm.
uh, a seminary student being forced to sit and pray over the over the dead body of a witch, and every night she goes after him. It's great. It's absolutely great. Couldn't recommend it more. But it's just been not as dense. Like last year, I watched like 30 horror movies for Halloween.
Well, also October 2020 was a very different time, even though it was only a year ago, in this global pandemic than October 2021 is.
Yeah, yeah, it's a different world. I have to actually do things.
Yeah.
Wild. How about you?
Well, I watched was it a horror film? I've seen. I watched Amerigeddon by Chuck Norris's son, Mike Norris. That no, I'm just kidding. I mean, I did watch it, but that's not a horror movie.
That sounds like a horror movie, but like actual terror. As
Yeah, no, it's like what if shitty militia memes and Alex Jones talking points from the Obama years were a movie? Like literally, an actor at one point like has the line like "Don't hurt me, I'm just a crisis actor," and you're like, this is awesome.
what year is
No,
it?
it's a half star. It's from 2016, right at the end of the Obama years. But no, on the horror front, actually, I've been kind of all over the map. Since I'm of the two of us, I'm more the documentary guy. I'll do a quick shout out if you're interested. I caught it up on Tubi. I think it's also on Shutter or Hoopla. There's one called Haunters: The Art of the Scare. That's a documentary about people that set up um, a range of haunted houses from just like the Passion Project in your driveway and garage every Halloween to a downright, masochist, possibly just a serial killer if he wasn't just running haunted houses. But it's exactly what that sounds like. If you're interested in that, it was kind of one of the ones I watched as like a kick off my cycle of horror movies for October. Um, Really actually talked me out of ever going to a haunted house again because the ante has just been upped too much, and now I'm just like, oh fuck all that. I'm not that interested. But it's a character study. It's like it's not as good as an Errol Morris movie, but it's that Errol Morris concept, or at least the way I've always thought of Errol Morris is you find interesting real characters out there in the world and document them, and that's going to make an interesting movie. And they found some interesting characters, and one person who I think should be in jail. But that one is, I mean, it's I can't remember the guy's name, and I'm not gonna, wouldn't even give a shout out if I could remember it. But it's like the haunted house where like you have to sign a 40-page non-disclosure agreement that includes like you could be drugged, you could be beaten, you could have your fingernails ripped out, you get all this crap, and if you make it through, you win. I forget whatever the amount of money was. Um, and then it can last up to 10 hours long. Like it's ridiculous. I think it's more of like a psychological thing. Also I've done no research on this. Like it doesn't sound like I'm like how is this legal or allowed to happen? No, the one I wanted to mention actually, I did sort of a separate little side project because it was only 3 movies. Um, I went through and I watched all the versions of Halloween. I did the John Carpenter one. I mean, I've seen that a bunch of times. Actually, I took an authorship class when I was in film school. They called them authorship class when you studied one filmmaker. And I took a John Carpenter one, which was really good. And I wrote my main paper in that class on the opening sequence of Halloween, the first one, the one take wonder that is that opening sequence. And so I watched that one again, and then I watched the Rob Zombie one from 2007, and then I watched the David Gordon Green directed one from 2018 that has a sequel that's probably out right now by the time this episode drops. Halloween Kills, the sequel for that one. And you know what? It got me thinking in a weird way about these shared cultural myths about like boogeymen. And I was like, this story originated with John Carpenter in the 70s, and it still rings true and terrifies people up to today.
Mm,
And I kind of like each version of it for different reasons.
interesting.
Um, I'm not a huge Rob Zombie film fan, but I'm curious. I still have 2 or 3 more of his to watch. But I'm curious. He can put together a set piece really well. That finale in Devil's Rejects to Freebird is pretty spectacular. And what is Halloween but a collection of really great, terrifying sequences? And some of them are better than others, but like his version is pretty solid. It starts off with just like such on the nose, horrific, like white trash dialogue. The origin story of Michael Myers. It's kind of cartoonish in a way, but it's an interesting setup. And then also you have Malcolm McDowell playing the Dr. Loomis part, which is kind of fun to watch him choose some scenery. Um, and then the new one, you get Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis back. I'm sorry, back playing Laurie Strode. So it was like, oh, this is actually just a direct. It's called Halloween, but obviously, I mean, people that have, or you're listening to Romero coverage on a political cinema podcast. I'm sure you're aware of Halloween, but having her back all these years later, seeing the generational trauma that the original movie caused in her family, because you see her daughter and her granddaughter now in the story. It's I don't know. It's pretty. It's a pretty fun approach to the classic storyline, but these narratives connect in some way and they end up just being retold. And sure, you could just be like, okay, and I tend to be cynical sometimes. Oh, they're just being retold because that's how Hollywood is. They just like to make money. And why invent something new when you can just be, retread some old story? That's why you have multiple versions of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Scream is getting a reboot next year. There's another version now of I Know What You Did Last Summer. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. These all have either series or spin-offs or direct remakes now. But I think it also speaks to something inherent in the horror genre that like people seek out these stories of I don't know. It came up in the David Gordon Green 2018 Halloween about this whole idea of like, oh, the boogeyman is real. So I had that in my head of just like, these are all like interesting boogeyman stories that keep coming back and creeping people out. I don't have an answer to that. It's just interesting the cycle of horror we're in. It makes me actually also appreciate the Jordan Peele's out there that are doing original uh, boogeyman
Yeah, I
stories.
mean, last year we talked about art horror. In some ways, I'm so out of touch with what's in theaters right now. You know, I don't know where our art horror cycle is right now, frankly. So, like, part of it is we were sort of at this moment where all that stuff was happening, but also we were like in a creative effervescence for the last half decade at least, if not more, in horror as a genre. And I do think you're right. It's sort of like doing monster movies in series. Like, it's because or like your Godzilla movies, like they were sort of structured that way in the past at a point at which franchise building wasn't quite the same thing, but they did it then. And so it sort of
Right.
feels natural now. I think the reason you do that now is because when basically, I mean, you don't do this stuff in horror until the slasher boom of the 80s, as far as I know, right? So it's like this sort of, but then you did it. So like you have these 80s and 90s franchises, and that's what you're feeding off of still. Um,
Yeah.
but there are new horror franchises. There's been, a whole bunch of them in the
Right.
2000s and 2010. So it's not part of it is it feels, I don't like it in some ways, but it feels like you said more natural just because we're used to it from the past, which may just be bullshit because it was just as cynical then. And there's a reason all of, like, for instance, the Halloween series runs out of steam because they're bad, right? Not all of them, and I know there's defenders, and please don't at me, but like, you know what I mean?
No, I think maybe that was it because I was in like the Halloween universe. And yeah, there's diminishing returns. There's diminishing returns in all those franchises, but like I don't know, the zombie one seemed because also that was a reboot, so that there's a freshness to that, and then seeing the 2018 one, like there's a freshness to it, but also it is tied into the original universe. So um, yeah, I don't know. Also, I think you are aware you just went and saw a current art house horror movie. That is the state of it right now.
Very. All right, I take that back. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
That
but
is
also
state of it.
the state of modern theaters is all fucked up right now, so it's kind of
Right.
unfair. Let's give it another year and see where we're at.
See where things land. I mean, I think, what was it? People keep talking about Freaky, which in some ways I didn't actually notice when it came out, which was sort of the problem.
Yeah.
Which I because that didn't do well, that apparently was one of the reasons why they sent the new Halloween out of theaters for. I mean, which doesn't fine. Nothing's normal right now.
Well, since you mentioned Abby, the film, speaking of on YouTube and not in great quality, we have a George Romero film to discuss here, Martin, which we're just going to go ahead and still say 1977. That is when it is credited to. I ended up going through and looking. I mentioned at the end of the last episode that Martin came out in 77. Hey, that's the same year Star Wars came out. How different of a movie could you get from, top of the box office with Star Wars to, an art house hit at the time like Martin? So then, of course, my film brain was just like, wait a minute, what else was going on in the world of horror in
Mm.
1977? Not to run through the whole list, but like you've also got Suspiria, you've also got House, you've also got Eraserhead, you've also got The Hills Have Eyes, you've also got Rabid. There's The Psychic, which is on my list. I haven't seen it yet. Orca, I mean, the killer whale movie. Can't skip that one. Deathbed, the bed that kills. No, sorry, the bed that.
Bed that eats.
Yeah, you gotta have the bed that eats. Not, I mean, it kills you when it eats you, but it's the bed that eats. And Petey Wheatstraw, The Devil's Son-in-Law, which is a fantastically fun Rudy Ray Moore film. The Child, Blue Sunshine. It's a pretty interesting. I mean, just like the top 4 or 5 there, those are pretty iconic films in the world in the world of cinematic horror, all in 77. Kind of makes you wonder what was going on in 76, 75 that
That caused it to be that way.
yeah.
Did you mention Demon Seed?
Oh, Demon Seed. No, I didn't. Oh, and I forgot John Waters, Desperate Living.
Yeah, no, Demon Seed is great. Desperate Living, I haven't even seen that one.
It's been I mean, it was like VHS for me, but it's John Waters in the
Yeah,
70s.
but I mean, Rabid, and I'm not a huge fan of The Hills Have Eyes. Deathbed is definitely a movie, and then Suspiria and House are like just straight up masterpiece level, like just
Hmm.
next level movies.
Oh, for sure,
Um,
yeah. And I finally just watched Suspiria, and it was one of those like I can't find a single thing wrong with this.
yeah.
5 stars and a heart.
When you told me you watch it, I just listened to the soundtrack for like days.
Yep, yep.
Oh wow,
I've
yeah.
been playing around the house, like doing dishes, doing whatever. We were vacuuming, cleaning up for my son's birthday party last week. And I was like, I'm gonna put this on. And then I threatened, like with my partner here, I was like, I'm gonna play this when we're passing out candy this year. And she's like, No, you're not. We're gonna be that house if you do.
Do it, do
It's
it.
like,
You
that's the
gotta
one
do
night a
it.
year. It's when you want to be that house. Come on.
Yeah,
Let's have
come
some fun
on, have
here.
a black light and just do that. I mean, the more you can get like that art design, the better. But good luck.
Oh yeah, no, I've I have oil lamps that I hang on the walkway up to the house that I light. There's like a three on each side, and then we have the big orange spotlight, and then we're playing Suspiria and passing out candy.
Hell yeah.
We are that
Hell
house already. I mean, come on. Yeah.
yeah. I'm gonna really miss this year, like, because I used to be in like a nice, like, walkable neighborhood. I mean, I am, but I'm like near a campus now. It's bullshit. I don't really want to be around, drunk 19 and 20-year-olds having like their Halloween thing. I like the trick or treating bit. Like, I like the communalness of trick or treating. Um, and I lived, in Cleveland Heights. I live by a street which is notorious for like the elaborateness of like. There must be so much peer pressure on that street. It is wild. I think you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's like 1,000 kids there every year, like literally 1,000 at least. It's a total zoo, but it's awesome. It's like I just want to know if somebody put out their like skeletons riding golf carts thing again.
Somebody did.
Yeah.
Somebody did.
Um,
But yes, not great quality on YouTube, streaming for free. Martin, George A. Romero's. I've seen it worded as riff on vampire movies or vampire folklore. I think you were the one who first turned me on to this one as potentially George Romero's masterpiece.
My name is Martin. I'm 84 years old. People think I'm crazy when I tell them how old I am. I'd like to be normal. I just have a sickness. The only way I can survive is by drinking blood. It's not easy living the way I do. I have to be careful all the time. But I'm pretty good at it. I think as I get older, I get better. I haven't been caught yet.
Martin, another kind of terror.
You see, people don't understand what's wrong. They think that I'm a monster. They think I'm a vampire. People don't realize that those things I see in the movies are not real. I don't have a whole lot of women. It's nice to watch them. I watch them a lot all the time. I have to be sure that nothing goes wrong. I follow them. I plan. I'm very careful. I have needles now. I can use them. I can put them to sleep. And it doesn't hurt.
Martin, another kind of terror.
I would like to be like everyone else. I have to do things that I don't necessarily like to do, but I want to stay alive. I do need blood.
From the director of Night of the Living Dead. Martin, another kind of terror.
What's your quick pitch for people that are not familiar with Martin, Isaac?
I mean, I think what you could say is this is for me at least, it might be a second greatest movie. It's debate. It's so hard with him, actually, especially if you're dealing with '70s him. But I think it might be, at least for me, it might be his second greatest after Dawn of the Dead. So part of what you're dealing with is a vampire construction in the post-industrial wasteland surrounding 70s Pittsburgh, right? A movie about social isolation, a movie about superstition, a movie about sexual frustration but inability to connect with people, and a movie about how if you apparently plan really well, you can do really fucked up shit. And no one will notice. No one notices him.
That's true.
I mean, functionally, sorry, I just went from description to like starting to analyze. But basically, I mean, the deal with Martin is that he's a young man. It's not clear if he's like even in his 20s, who believes he is a vampire. He thinks that it's a disease. He doesn't have any classical vampire traits. He doesn't have any fangs. And so what he does is stalk and hunt women, knock them out with basically stick them with a needle with something to knock them out, and then takes off his clothes, presumably rapes them, and then cuts their wrists and drinks their blood.
Yep.
In fact, that's what he does on a train in the first scene. And no one, as far as we can tell, because we only see his little world, this is not a crime spree. He's not a serial killer people are looking for. Nobody, it's just incidental. And he's...
Well, one quick detail, too. He's not just like, he's making it look like suicide. Because he slices her arm in the opening scene. Like, he slices her arm, so it looks like somebody just committed suicide on the train.
Gosh, I misunderstood this entire movie. I'm done. I'm sorry. This podcast is done.
That's how I took it, because it's like right in the forearm. Granted, there's just good veins there, I guess, as well. But
yeah, it just feels like weird, because the first autopsy report is going to notice there's a needle and there was something in her system.
One would think, when you mentioned the needle and like knocking someone out too, I was immediately picturing the wrong thing, because if you haven't seen the movie, that description makes it seem like, oh, injection, passed out. This is not a quick pass out drug that he's using, and that comes up in several of the scenes when he drugs people, where like it takes a minute to kick in and for them to be passed out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there's always a struggle. There's always terror. There's always him saying it's fine.
Right. How unnerving is that though, when like your assailant who just stuck you with a needle and you don't even know what that was? Like, oh, it's fine. Extra creep level.
Yeah.
With that kind of a scene there. That's the opening scene to mention first, because it comes first, obviously, but also because that's our protagonist. That's our main character. So you're watching someone drug, like you said, kind of not overtly, but it seems like he's sexually assaulting. He's drugging, raping, and then drinking the blood of and murdering someone. Doesn't really grab your sympathy right away.
No.
But Romero, because he knows how to tell a goddamn story, by the time you go through this entire plot with him, doing other horrible things, doing the same horrible things as well, you're never, or I was never fully just like, I'm turning this off, or what. Like, he gets your sympathy on Martin's side throughout the whole story, which is pretty remarkable when you start off with that scene.
Yeah. I mean, it is. Oh, it's like it's if you're talking about like sort of putting the stakes of this on deck and just giving, just opening up with something. It's shocking, and part of what it is this would be a grindhouse opening. Like, this would be like an exploitative opening if it wasn't for all the detail and care that he doesn't shoot it that way. It doesn't feel like that, right? The music doesn't give you that. I mean, this is so. Let's just give a little bit of the premise. So that's your opening scene. But what he's doing, he stops off in Pittsburgh, gets picked up by his old relative Tatakuda, and who's always wears a suit, and is taken to, I can't remember the name of the town, but like basically one of the small dying steel towns around Pittsburgh.
Oh, it's Braddock.
So he's taken to Braddock, Pennsylvania, and they're basically where Kuda is supposed to watch over him for the family. He's been appointed by the family to watch over. The family is cursed with vampirism, and he is there. He's now been appointed to watch after Martin, and his granddaughter, who's a little bit older than Martin, lives there and doesn't buy any of this. So this is in this,
which is it's a fun duality to set up right away, because so we see the act or an act of murder at the beginning that does involve him, drinking blood. And then it sets up one person who believes he's this, what does he say? Like, he's 80-some-year-old vampire, Kuda. Mm-hmm. And then so you have somebody that believes he is, and then someone who's like, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. And Romero plays with that throughout the rest of the narrative, with this whole idea of just like, wait, because I even myself several times, like, there's a long stretches where there's no vampire shit going on. and then something happens. You're like, oh wait, is he a vampire? I mean, he's drinking blood. He's doing this, and this, and it really, I think that sets up the duality perfectly because the two people he's living with, one believes he is, and one believes, one is like, that's ridiculous.
And and part of it is that, she believes that, I mean, that the family superstition. I mean, she doesn't say cult-like, but it's not exactly. I mean, they're Catholic, right? It's like this very, very traditional, like, sort of white ethnic, like, background, right? In dying industrial town, in a very
Yeah.
close ethnic community in which everybody knows each other, right? I mean, that's the feeling you get. But part of it is, for her, that's part of her frustration at being stuck in this town. I was sort of saying she's basically the woman in a Bruce Springsteen song.
Okay, because I'm not a big Bruce Springsteen fan. You mean that how?
Okay.
I mean, I don't know his music that well.
Yeah, well, I mean, you should, and or sorry, I won't be judgmental.
It's fine.
But basically, so Bruce Springsteen songs, a lot of them, if you're talking about the 60s the 70s and 80s, are basically about things like dying industrial towns and being frustrated with your lot in life and being trapped in this
Oh, yeah.
manual labor position and getting in a souped up car and just blasting out of town. And so part of it is, and then always taking this girl with you and saying, this is the chance that we have. She's the girl in the song, and then Tom Savini, who plays her boyfriend, is basically the protagonist of most Bruce Springsteen songs. But that's literally what this is.
Okay, now as someone who isn't too familiar with Bruce Springsteen songs, does he have a song? Okay, I definitely recognize that, but does he also have one that involves a vampire too?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, we have to look that one up. Anyway,
I just mean that, like, her story that's going on here, where she sort of relates to Martin as a victim of this, as basically someone who's sick, who needs medical care, and instead the family is just hyping him up, right? But for her, Martin is ultimately part of her frustration with the whole family setup and her own frustration at being stuck here, and a boyfriend who isn't even that attentive, right? But she basically, so I found that all interesting. I mean, like, the post-industrial landscape is something that I think really sets the tone. The dying town, like, when the opening of the movie, which has, I think a really good score that sort of highlights the isolation of all this. When Kuda and Martin are going to the house, you see this, you see the dying industrial town, and we're from Cleveland. Like, we know what this is. This is very.
We know what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true, because then so you're just swapping out, like, the gothic, old school vampire setting for a decaying industrial town.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. I think that is exactly what they're doing. They're making lemons out of, they're making lemonade out of lemons, because that's actually where they can shoot, right?
Oh yeah, no, that's a hallmark of Romero. No, and it works great for the story too, because it lends it's a different kind of dreary backdrop or dreary setting to tell a vampire story. It's like, the rainy, creepy, old school, like, gothic setting, like, it's not sunny and we'll get to that in a second, but, like, it's, any of the old world, old school kind of Dracula movies, those are very dreary places as well, and that's the same feeling I get with decaying industrial towns. And you have that in this one too. Before we kind of move on from, like, the family situation he's got in the house here too, Kuda, who I wrote in my notes that's his elderly cousin or uncle, whatever his relationship is. It's family.
He's his cousin, yeah.
Cousin, okay. He's constantly calling him Nosferatu.
Yeah.
And he does, like, the crucifix at him. There's garlic hanging up. He hangs up. Doesn't he hang garlic on Martin's door to his bedroom at one point, so he can't come out of his bedroom? And obviously none of it has any effect on Martin, because this is things that Romero is playing with here. And I gotta say, it's that fine line that Romero walks, because Kuda, as the I'm spacing on the actor's name. I don't actually remember if I looked him up. Whoever's playing him plays it with earnestness and conviction. Like, he believes it. He believes this is Nosferatu in his house. But it's family, so there's obligations, I guess, whatever. But it's comical. Like, he's holding up a crucifix and Martin just grabs it. Or garlic, he just, like, yanks it down. He's like, what are you doing? Like, it's kind of a comical scene, but it's not really played for laughs. It's sort of like we were saying with Night Riders in our previous episode, where, like, it's inherently goofy. Night Riders was, and there's those scenes in this one that are kind of inherently goofy too, but they're not played for laughs, and you're not laughing at them. Because like I don't know, it's just Romero and his tones that he's able to balance are really fascinating so far, in the ones we've been watching.
Yeah, no, well, I think part of it is so that's Lincoln Maisel playing Cuda,
Thank you.
and he's also stars in the amusement park. So
Oh,
if you need another reason to watch amusement park, that's the
yeah, I
other.
do.
He has 2 credits on Letterboxd, and these are the 2.
Well, I will be caught up on his filmography by the end of this October.
Yeah, definitely. But part of it is he's incredibly believable. He really sells this sort of rigid old world belief with this
Hmm.
strict patriarchy and strict control. And part of it is that Martin is wrapped up in that in a very complicated way because he believes it, right? He believes that he's, the he believes that he is a vampire, that he's over 80 years old, that there's other members of the family that are like this. Is it true in the movie? We don't know, and I think that's something to discuss. But he continuously says it's not magic, and he sort of uses it later on in the movie. Christina gets him a phone, and he uses that to dial into a late night radio show where he becomes like a major attraction, right? And sort of talks through his issues with this with the late night host. And part of it is, I mean, you get this feeling that like his sort of defining of the vampire, one, it's his actual experience if he's a vampire. If he's not a vampire, he's defining this stuff. The vampirism is a way of channeling his frustrations, which are primarily senses of isolation and sexual, inabilities to connect with people,
Hmm.
inabilities to sort of like, I mean, this is a movie in which the landscape is dying and gives you a sense of social isolation and social decay with sort of only the old remaining in this dying industrial town. And so his isolation is that much sort of increased, except when you go up into the hills, right? And there's somewhat nicer houses where he stalks people. But like, I think in a sense that the version of vampirism allows him to sort of define and have some sort of control over this stuff, maybe to a certain degree, or it's just what he is, and who knows?
Right. Now that is interesting because so I read him calling into the DJ as Romero very cleverly figured out a way that feels organic to the plot, but allowed him to work in a bunch of exposition.
Mm.
Because he's deconstructing all the vampire myths. There's no real magic ever. He's like, no, I don't do any of the vampire stuff. No, there's no garlic crucifixes. I can go out in the sunshine. All that stuff. He even becomes a recurring guest on this DJ show called The Count. Like he refers to him as The Count, and
Hmm.
it's really fascinating. Like and I don't mean that exposition thing in a negative way. I think it seamlessly works in here the same way you'll have like a priest confession scene. People just like, oh, here there's just a bunch of exposition here, so everybody's caught up on the story. He could have easily given that dialogue to some other character elsewhere, but I like the DJ one because it allows him to just kind of also give Martin this non-tangible connection. Because like there are people calling in talking about Martin that you also hear on the show, and it's connecting him to a wider audience that like he doesn't actually physically connect with. So it's another thing, like you were mentioning connections before, and like he actually has something here with a DJ, but it's really just like a voice on a phone. But that it speaks to a wider connection, like across the town or however far it's going over the airwaves there. And they even use that in the credits. It's radio callers calling in to the DJ show, speculating about the Count and what happened to him and where'd he go or what's going on. Why hasn't he called in a while? So like, it's not really like a tangible connection that actually can mean much to Martin, but well, no, I mean, it does mean something to him because he calls in again and again throughout the movie.
I mean, well, part of it is this is the only, so it's exposition in terms of his mythos, and it's exposition in terms of how he thinks about himself and what his issues is, right? Like this is where he says, I've only done the sexy stuff when people are asleep, right?
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah.
only been able to do it then. And so he uses this is the only person he can, because he's murdering people,
Right.
One, because he's literally unable to connect with people. He's unable. I mean, but he does a little bit with Christina, right? He says what he feels with her. He feels like he can be open because she's not attacking him, right?
Right. Right.
And
Takes a minute, but yeah, they click.
also because he is attracted to her. There is a scene where he's staring at her legs through the stairs. Um, he's
Oh
just not gonna
yeah.
act. He's not gonna act on that. He's not gonna do anything that within the family he
Right.
acts doesn't act like a serial killer because he's not gonna get caught. He doesn't plan on getting caught. He's actually being careful. But this is where we sort of get a sense of like what he's actually doing and why he's
Hmm.
doing it completely, which is I think a really interesting way of doing exposition and an interesting way of sort of working through this. I mean, what is the psychology of Martin's deal, right? Like it's the social isolation, it's the inability to connect, it's the fear of sexuality, it's the fear of women, really, right?
Which plays totally against a vampire stereotype of that very sexualized, constantly craving. Like there's a inherent sexiness to the vampire story, and they just takes it right out of it in this one. Like there's no seduction scenes here. I think I joked with you earlier. You get more like the Bill Cosby form of seduction where he drugs someone to sleep and then attacks them.
Right. Jesus, that's a really
Well, it's what he's doing. But the
yeah.
it's not that sexy seductive vampire that you get here. It's the timid, has a problem connecting, needs you to be unconscious so he can do his thing vampire.
I mean, I think that's the thing is that is the actual deconstruction going on here, right? Like that's a really is I mean it's part of the reversal that he's doing. There's no
Yeah.
mysticism, there's nothing, and actually this person is yeah. No, I think that's a lot of it. Yeah.
But then it straddles that line too of just like, wait, is he even a vampire? Because like we were talking about it before we were recording, and it was kind of like, is it still up in the air by the time this movie's done? It's really interesting.
I mean I think it is. I mean there's part of it is he basically says that he has urges to feed at particular times. He doesn't do it all the time and he doesn't need to. I mean, when you read descriptions of this movie, analyses I've read have oftentimes focused on superstition and the effects of superstition, right? He believes it. Kuda believes it.
Right.
Christina doesn't. She gets out. So we should point out. So basically, what ends up happening is he ends up making a connection with a housewife, and a sort of put upon abandoned housewife who he's delivering things to, and she's attracted to him, but she's also attracted because like in the relationship she's the dominant one, she's more experienced, she can sort of define it, and he's like this blank slate who doesn't talk, right? He almost never talks, he talks very rarely in the movie, and so like it's so she's using him as sort of as an attempt to have sort of I guess an emotional outlet or some sort of connection, right?
Yeah, it seemed like just like to feel something. Like she's very
Yeah,
it's Abby is her character name, just like this depressed suburban housewife.
right. And she's trying to feel something. I mean, there's sort of echoes of the themes he was dealing with in Season of the Witch, for instance. There,
Hmm.
um, but like, and then Martin, of course, is like this is the first time he's ever had any sort of experience like this at all. I don't know what effect is this. Is this where we have an arc?
It seems like it because he actually has a connection with somebody, and as far as we've seen in the movie, it's the first time he ends up having a sexual experience that the other person is awake and aware of.
Hmm.
Because he begins to have an affair with her. It takes a minute because he's an awkward guy, so like she makes an advance and he bolts the first time, and then he, in typical sexy vampire kind of way, he arrives back at her house one day and he's like, "I've decided I will have an affair with you." Like I think that's also a direct quote. You're like, "Wow, really, really hot there, Martin." And then they do have that, and it's interesting because I think the way that this feeds into the arc is while they're having their affair, is he still going out and killing and drinking blood? Yeah, I'm not sure he's like vampire feeding while they're having their affair. Like that almost satiates his appetite for a minute. And there's a stretch where I was like, when he goes back and actually attacks somebody again, I was like, oh right, yeah, this is supposed to be a vampire story. Like it's a little bit of a relationship drama for like a 10-15 minute stretch here.
I mean, that's just it. Is like he talks about that on the radio. He's very very confused. He doesn't seem to need to feed as much, but he is starting to get the urges, right? So part
Mhm.
of what's going on is this is creating conflict in him where he has this connection, he's getting some of what he's actually wanted, and he doesn't really know what to do with it. Like, having connection with someone is actually a lot of work. So he's feeling it, but he keeps like he's stalking women, he's watching women, and he doesn't find any of the women attractive anymore, right?
Oh,
So
you're right. You're right.
love
You're
with
right.
is he in love with this person, with Abby? Is he like not really? He doesn't seem like he can be. Like in the end, he doesn't really have emotions for people outside of what they do for him, including Christine, right? Like
Hmm.
Christina. Um, but it does sort of satiate him in ways that he doesn't understand and makes him uncomfortable.
Yeah,
So eventually he feeds on a target who he never would normally have fed on, which is a man, because there isn't really any sexual outlet. He's already got a sexual outlet,
right.
right? And then eventually, Abby commits suicide using similar methods.
Yeah, she cuts her wrist.
Yeah, she cuts her wrist. It's the sort of thing he would do. It's what he makes things look like. And it should be pointed out, Abby goes to the family church, right? She's part of the community in a sense, right? She goes to Kuda's store, and he tells the radio host that it's kind of a relief that he's out of this relationship
Hmm.
because this takes more work. It takes some of his urges being sated and other ones not. And like, what actually is the deal with Martin? Like, why does he act the way he does? I feel like it leaves some of that up in the air in a way.
It does.
But not in a bad way, but I think in a very productive way. It's like, why is
Yeah.
he, why would he? Yeah, it's like actually having contact with people is different than the fantasies that you had.
Then it also speaks to Romero's able to write a screenplay and then make a film in which you can answer the question of, is he actually a vampire, with a yes and the movie makes sense, and a no and I think the movie makes sense.
Yeah,
But it doesn't feel like at any point that it's pulling punches in any way to like keep it mysterious. It feels very organic the way he lets the story unfold and the scenes that he shows you.
yeah,
Um,
I think
yeah,
absolutely.
which is commendable and a sign of an amazing storyteller. Because it doesn't. There's never a feeling like a gimmick where you're like, rewatching it a second time, you're like, oh well, he should have been doing this. Like, no, it all feels completely natural the way that it unfolds. And do we want to discuss the very end at all, or I don't know? I don't
Absolutely.
feel like this one is not terribly well seen. So gigantic spoiler
Spoiler
alert if you
alert.
haven't seen Martin and you don't want anything to be ruined for you there as far as how the end goes.
Before the spoiler, I mean, do you have any thoughts about how this is shot?
Not particularly, I guess. I mean, I don't look at Romero's stuff as it's not like a Terrence Malick film, cinematography wise. It does what
Right.
it needs to do. I feel at times, and I did a little bit, I guess, on this one where it feels like, and I don't mean this as a slight at all. It feels like he knows exactly what he's doing with a low budget, because this one is like
Mm.
$200,000. It's 1977 money, but still, it doesn't feel like cheaply shot. And actually, there's a few scenes that are really amazing. Like even the opening sequence we mentioned when he drugs, rapes, and then drinks the blood of the lady on the train. It feels claustrophobic and very tense when he drugs her first, and there's like a little bit of a struggle before she actually passes out. That was a really striking scene. But no, I mean it's kind of par for the course as far as how Romero shoots his stuff. I think, which is well, but
Functionally, I
yeah,
think
yeah, it's well, and it hides a potential lack of budget so seamlessly that you don't really notice. It doesn't look like a low budget movie. It looks like a character piece of, like you said, a decaying industrial town with potentially a vampire living in it for a bit.
I mean I think the other bit of I mean we've talked about sort of the location shooting, which I think is really great. I think the other thing I think I mentioned it maybe a little bit like is the score. I think the score is actually really good,
Hmm.
and I think it does a lot of work to heighten the sense of isolation and to heighten the sense of sort of despair and inability to get out of both this sort of the psychology of Martin, and also the level of this sort of mystical fog that he's trapped in through his family.
Mm-hmm. So I was just checking the budget real quick while you were talking there, and actually, apparently, that was a producer myth. He claimed it was $250,000, but it was actually about $100,000 to shoot this movie.
Wow,
You can't tell.
You can't tell.
Which I think is one of the great signs of Romero's films over the years, is you can't really tell what the budget is because the movie does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also, again, credits due. He's a writer, he directed it, and also he's still editing his movies at this point. So,
yeah,
bravo.
I mean, this is the Pittsburgh crew. It's shot on location. I mean, it's the whole thing, right? I mean, part of it is 10 years after Night of the Living Dead. He's not necessarily where he started, but it's pretty close, it feels like, in a lot of ways. Yeah, he can go to Cannes and he can try to sell his movie, which he couldn't have done then. And he has a bigger budget, I guess, but he's sort of working with a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, spoiler alert. End of the movie.
Right to the heart.
Ooh, all right.
Man, I winced. I winced with this one. And you're like, oh yeah, Tom Savini is around. He's working with him. He's doing effects. There's plenty of blood effects already, but just, man, Martin is talking to, does he call the radio DJ one last time? Or is he just sleeping in bed?
He's literally just in bed. In fact, he's
just in bed. Okay.
I think.
So he's in bed, and what happens is that Kuda believes, because of the way that Abby, the woman Martin was having an affair with, died slitting her wrist in the bathtub. He believes Martin to be her killer, and then he stakes him right through the heart, while Martin is just laying there in bed. And it's a legit like jump scare kind of scene, and it is bloody because it is a stake to the heart. And then he's buries him in the backyard in a flower bed.
While you hear the radio, basically the radio show talking about whatever happened to this guy.
Right. Where's the count? He hasn't called in a while. I wonder what's going on. Crucifix on top.
And people speculating about him, calling in about having seen him or whatever. Right? Like it's really it's as bleak and lonely an ending as the beginning prepared us for.
That's really true. And again, like I mentioned with the character arc at the very start of the movie, when you start off with, a sexual assaulter, a rapist, murderer, vampire, how am I going to connect with this character? I wasn't necessarily sad that he, gets the stake through the heart by the end, but it does affect you because, it's John, the actor playing Martin, like he's good at what he's doing here. And also I think it's the narrative that Romero puts in front of us, following Martin through all of the, I want to say adventures, that's a little bit strong, all of his through his life here a little bit while he's hanging out in Braddock with his cousin and his cousin's granddaughter, that by the end, like, it hits you, like it's a shocking ending for the violence, but also you're like, I don't know, I'm not articulating too well like how the character arc here, because it's one of those that like I wasn't expecting to connect at all with this character the way it starts.
You know what this reminds me of? Manchester by the Sea. Okay, why am I saying this? I remember having a conversation after Manchester by the Sea came out where I think it was somebody's daughter, like there were two people, and one of them was complaining about like it didn't seem like the character moved forward very much, right? Mm-hmm. But if you watch Manchester by the Sea, he actually has a very realistic arc. It's that he does get better. He is more effectively able to mourn and get over sort of the toxic masculinity that he's sort of totally embedded in. But he doesn't get all the way better. He doesn't magically become better. He's not a happy ending. And Martin, in a certain sense, through his relationship with Abby, has some changes, becomes more mature in the fact that he's a delusional vampire serial killer, has some realizations about himself, but doesn't get out of the way and continues his basic behavior without going all the way. So it's a realistic art for a totally kind of unrealistic situation that's also made totally grounded. And then you're watching this arc, you've come to accept this arc, you could end with this arc, and instead the main character gets stabbed and buried in a garden instead, which is also a perfectly natural arc for a vampire. Sure. So I think that's part of why it's shocking, is that we have become invested in his evolution as a character, or how that's happening, and trying to understand how that's happening. We've been drawn in right? We've been drawn into all these scenes, and then it abruptly ends.
Yeah.
Brutally, and not even for any murders he committed, of course. That's like the cruel irony.
Right. Well, because also remember, you could be like, I was leaning more towards the vampire end of it, of being like, oh, this is a vampire character. I'm not 100% convinced. There's wiggle room there to convince me otherwise, but that's where I was at when the movie ended. And then since it is a stake to the heart, I was just like, oh, that's how the vampire gets taken out. Also, that's how a human would be taken out, granted. But that was the mindset I was in, was like, oh, okay, this is a vampire story. And then that ending comes, you're like, all right, that works for me. But like you said, it doesn't discount the fact that it is bleak as fuck.
Yeah, it is. I mean, his arc is either going to continue, he keeps doing this stuff, or something gets him, and I guess it was going to be the here's the other thing, is what does it say about Kudo, right? Like, we've watched him through this whole movie go take everything absolutely as seriously as you could possibly imagine. There's no particular reason to believe that he couldn't do what he's doing here. At the same time, it's still kind of shocking to see him actually do it, because even though he's, in a certain sense, because he's not part of Martin's other life. I mean, he is, but so much of what's going on with him, he seems like he lives in a realistic world where he's delusional, or where he's an old man or whatever. And here he is doing something more so than getting in an old school priest who can do an exorcism, or, making his family miserable and treating the younger ones in condescending and misogynistic and patriarchal ways. He's straight up just murdered somebody.
Yeah.
That's shocking in itself, even though you knew he believed it all.
Yeah. As you were just describing the arc too, it kind of occurred to me, I wonder if it's more, not necessarily that you come to like Martin and you get that ending. I think there's an element of pity in there as well, maybe. I don't know. I'm still working through some of that.
There's a difference between liking somebody and having empathy for them.
Right. That's it. Yeah, exactly.
And part of what Romero does successfully, because this is not a likable person. There's almost no attributes about him that are likable, frankly. But what you do successfully do through the performances of all the actors, through the music, and through everything, is create empathy for him.
Right.
That's some pretty impressive filmmaking, which is why I think it's his maybe second best movie, and along with Season of the Witch and Night Riders, maybe his most character driven.
Yeah.
Because it's unlike the zombie movies or the crazies. Mind you, I haven't seen all those movies yet, and I'm hoping to catch a few more. So there are more, okay? Like, I admit it. So I'm just going to say, of the ones that I've seen, this is one of the least action-packed in some ways. There's actually, there is a pretty impressive home invasion scene where he's actually hunting somebody. And I think that's actually, that's what I was sort of thinking of when I was asking about shooting. I think it's pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, no, that's really well blocked and filmed, and that's, the horror of a home invasion. Although I think that's also in the daylight too.
Oh, that's at night.
Is that at night? Okay. It's a well lit home, I guess. But yeah, actually, when you're talking about there, the different narratives between like Knight Rider, Season of the Witch, Martin, some like the non-zombie, the non-apocalypse films, to a certain extent, I think Martin, narrative-wise, is actually doing more work because of such a repellent main character right from the jump.
That's true. Yeah, there's nothing to empathize with that anybody would want to be part of.
Yeah.
Oh, I know we're sort of distracting, and I know we're winding down, but yeah, and this is out of order for the episode. But yeah, no, that scene, I just wanted to say, like, one of the things that's so good about it.
Wait, which scene?
Oh, the home invasion scene is, basically he's been stalking this person, and this woman, and he catches her with her husband out of town and her with her lover, and the person she's cheating with, which means she doesn't want to call the cops. So they're panicking and not able to handle the situation. And it's almost like he does guerrilla warfare throughout the house. He hides, he stabs them with a needle. He hides again, he stabs them with a needle. He just runs around. It's all part of what you see is like Martin's sheer level of calculation about everything that he does. Right? He knows exactly what he's doing. He's done this so many times. And it reminds me of Romero's underlying zombie theme, which is that the reason we lose is because were not able to coordinate, because the two of these people could have called the cops, closed the door, stuck together,
Yep.
and probably taken him. I mean, if he'd gone in there, like, the dude's bigger than him, the two of them could have taken him.
Yeah.
But they don't. They're not able to coordinate effectively or
Right.
plan effectively, and they fail.
Yep. And also too, like we mentioned, when he sticks somebody with his needles, it's not an instant, oh, passed out right away. Like the guy, the male in this situation is articulating very accurately, in my opinion, too, of just the horror of just like, I don't know what he just stuck me with, I don't know what he just injected me with, and there's like palpable horror to that.
Yeah.
Where it's not just somebody's coming in to rob me, like I've already been stuck by something. We need to get this guy. But like you said, it's a perfect narrative setup to allow the whole home invasion to play out in a very tense way. Because there's no help coming.
Out.
Yeah.
He's panicking.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. No. So, in other words, this is a really good movie. And if you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. It's also will be coming to 4K and Blu-ray. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. You just said that. Yeah. Blu-ray and 4K Ultra HD. Supposedly later this year. But there's only so much time left in the year. So hurry up, Second Sight Films.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of been out of... it's been out of print for so long. I think that's why it's on YouTube, because nobody's going to defend it. But it's totally worth owning.
So, okay, here's the dream double Blu-ray, double disc box set for this one. Supposedly, like there's the 95-minute one we watched. Supposedly, there's this original 165-minute version, which, as we mentioned with Night Riders, I don't care how long your movie is, George Romero. I'll watch whatever you're putting out. I'll watch the 165-minute version of this, bleak as it is. But you could also put on here the edited for the European market in 1978 Dario Argento version. He was the editor for it going out into Europe, called Vampire, with a score by Goblin. Let's get that Italian dubbed version out in that same package, please. I really want to see that. That would be pretty spectacular. Do you think this one's ever going to get remade, Isaac? As I was just talking about Halloween and these like cycles of remaking horror films. You think anyone's ever going to jump in and remake this one?
I don't think so. I'm trying to think of other than Dead movies, what of Romero's has been remade? There has to be something.
Well, my punchline for that was if you remake this very quickly, you can get a Timothée Chalamet in the main character part and have him play Martin.
Wow. That would read really differently.
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, I mean, part of the thing about Martin is like he's not unhandsome. Like he's handsome enough, but he's not hot.
Right. Right. Right.
So you just want
to dirty up Timothée Chalamet a little bit and see what happens. No, you're back to like the seductive, hot vampires against. That's not going to work. But,
yeah.
No, I think it's just the Dead ones. I don't think anything else of his is. I mean, nobody's remade Night Riders yet. Oh, the Crazies. I'm sorry, the Crazies.
The Crazies had a remake.
Crazies had a remake, yeah, with Timothy Olyphant. I watched that one recently.
Did we talk about it last episode?
I don't think so. It's not. It's not good. It misses sort of like the social commentary, like we mentioned with Romero, the social and political commentary that he has in his movies isn't like spoon-fed or like shoved down your throat. It's just sort of there and part of it, like it's baked in. And in the Crazies remake, it was just a little bit more like, hey, you know what this is really about? Like it was like, yeah, I just tell the story. Come on.
I don't know. The Dead movies can be pretty, on the nose in a sense, but like also
right.
But in a good way. I mean, putting it in a shopping mall isn't like subtle, but yeah, it's
well,
not.
No,
it's
that's
not
true.
like,
I know what you mean, but it's I don't know. It doesn't quite have the right touch. I don't know. I'd have to like kind of go back to my film journal and look at my notes on that one.
It's not. Yeah, because you're not. Yeah, I mean that the Crazies is kind of amazing. It's interesting. Speaking of not being, a political podcast, socially conscious, whatever. I think we talked about a lot of potentially political things. We just didn't frame them politically in this episode.
You did your Bruce Springsteen song, "The Dying Industrial Town."
I guess so, yeah. And the gender politics. We didn't actually put the gender politics completely out in front, but obviously in a world of men's rights, a character like this, God, can you imagine Martin with the internet?
Oh, like how it would be misinterpreted and.
Oh no, I mean the character in a world with the internet.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought you meant like incels would be like he's such a Chad or something, but no, the character itself having the internet in the narrative of the movie.
I mean, he wouldn't be a Chad, but yeah, no, he'd be something. But yeah, no, I mean, it in the narrative of the movie, it would be really interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's your remake. We're slowly just putting together our spec script on on the air.
A remake of this, but yes,
No, just watch this one. You don't need a remake.
just as sort of a postscript to thinking about Martin. As a movie that's sort of the result of sort of the post-industrial or the post-industrial moment starting in the 70s up through now that has sort of shaped our political and social geography to such a large degree. This occurs to me. This is a good time to plug the next shift by Gabriel Winant, which is about steel towns in the Pittsburgh area and the transformation of the working class from steel workers
To vampires.
to to the opposite of vampires, to care workers, to medical workers who
Oh, good.
who are predominantly women and women of color, Black women. So the changing composition of the working class and how that happens in these post-industrial places, which is of course really important for anybody who's trying to organize, or organize labor or organize at any level to understand how class changes in time. And I think it's a good companion for this movie. If you want your double bill, your weirdo double bill, that's it.
Oh, it's a book and a movie this time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, what have we got up next as we're wrapping up Romero month, Isaac?
Everything. So I think this next episode is going to be a wrap up, right? We've got sort of 3 episodes for this month.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to do is just throw everything at the wall. I'm going to watch some Romero that I haven't seen. You're going to watch some Romero that you haven't seen. I don't know if there's any that's going to overlap. Hopefully there'll be something, but we're just going to talk about what we like.
Yeah.
There might even be zombies. Who knows?
Okay, we can keep that a tease. I was gonna say there's definitely gonna be zombies on my part because the only zombie one of his I haven't seen now is Survival of the Dead, and I own it on DVD, and he has a commentary track. So
interesting. I might actually watch none of those and just leave it to you.
That's fine.
So yeah, that's what we're doing for the next episode, and then the sky's the limit. Who knows? Halloween will be over. It'll be Christmas time. No, it won't be. It'll be no. Christmas does not get a creep. I'm sorry. The only holiday that actually gets to creep in time is Halloween. Fuck capitalism. Fuck all of this stuff. We know why they don't do this with Thanksgiving, because you don't sell as much crap. Ugh. All right. I admit it. It gets into your brain. Kind of takes over. We're gonna just move on from that.
Are you good?
Yeah. Let's finish up. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I didn't want to interrupt mid tirade there. Also, the only thing I could go through my head was how much fucking money people spend on Halloween nowadays. So, capitalism is.
Yeah, Halloween is allowed to expand.
Yeah. It's only got expansion in front of it too. Anyway, before we sign off, be sure to rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you are using. And if you do enjoy the show, tell a friend or 2 or 3. We're up and running on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, YouTube, Letterboxd, the usual social media. Just follow the links in the show notes to the various socials. And until next time, I am Aaron.
And I'm Isaac. And, well, we hope that you stay safe out there for all of the same reasons that there are to stay safe out there that have been there for quite some time. Roving capitalism, destroying the landscape, plague, so forth. But I'd also like to say at this moment in which we're in, I think, a little bit of a minor strike wave, which is amazing, right? The last time we had that was in 2018 with the teacher strikes, and then all the way back. But we've got tractor factories, we've got nurses, we've got people in all sorts of sectors starting to go off.
The film industry.
The film industry, with the really big one, is going to be the film industry, right? I mean, honestly, this happens, we're going to be talking about it. And we're going to be promoting it the best we can, because the people who make our films deserve to, have all the power that all workers are supposed to have in their industry. And, I don't know, I just saw something that looks like there might be a Dollar General location that might be unionizing, which is just incredible. So, there is a world to win, even if it is on fire. I'm actually pretty close to a pretty large fire. I think it's about 12 to 10 miles away. Welcome to California. But yeah, stay safe for all of these reasons. Stay safe on the picket line. We're in solidarity with you.
Stay safe and stick together.
Exactly.